Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you. Plus, today we're talking about inclusive preschools. We're going to take you to two different districts to talk about these preschool facilities and also why the governor's budget plan is not going to fund this program.
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
And it's a couple of minutes after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, along with Dr. Edgar Zazwata, ACSA's executive director. I'm Naj Ali Khan, ACSA senior director of marketing and communications. Welcome. We're honored to have you with us here on a Wednesday. Go ahead and jump into the chat and say hello and let us know where you're watching from. Edgar, how are you?
I'm doing good. It looks, looking at the chat, I'm glad to hear some of our members are maybe doing better there. I know people excited about last days of school. I know some people are firmly in summer mode now, which was well deserved. I actually think it's an interesting set. I'm always surprised anybody tunes in during the summer, just because they they can be doing a lot of other things. But it's always fun to hear too, as the summer goes on, how our members are getting away. Those that can, there's some folks I will say who are working right through the summer, but even in those cases, hopefully they take a little bit of time here. But yeah, on a personal note, just had the chance to go around the state. I've been a part of a couple of retirement ceremonies, a couple of end of school ceremonies. So it's always a fun and exciting time of year here, as we have a lot of transitions, both with our students and obviously with our members as well.
Well, and let's make sure that we speak to those couple of retirement ceremonies that you've been to. You were in San Diego yesterday for Paul Gotthold's retirement, but you were at another one that's a lot closer to home for you last week in Southern California.
Yeah, I got to go to see Grant Bennett, a friend of the show here who usually chimes in. He did say maybe he's not going to watch any more shows now that he's retiring. Like that's it. No, but obviously I think people know the story there. I'm a product there of Paris Union High School District, so I got to go, and kind of full circle for me there to go and speak. And I did the math, and I realized how many years I had been since I graduated, which was kind of scary. Right? It's crept up there very, very quickly. But it was great to be part of a Grant Bennett celebration down there in Paris, and also with Dr. Paul Gothel yesterday in San Diego. So two great events, two great leaders across our state, and was humbled to just be a part of the proceedings there.
Yeah, and they will certainly be missed. We've talked so much this year, especially about all of these educators that are retiring and moving on, and how we're going to be replacing them with that next generation of leaders, but they are leaving, they are retiring with so much knowledge and experience. It's so interesting, Edgar. You and I were at Superintendent Symposium back in January, and we were saying that then, and now we're seeing more and more people retiring. It's a leadership vacuum, if you will.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, that's one of the things, and I think we keep track not just for superintendents but across the fold. And I think just given we were just talking backstage, right, about some of the years and the conversations we've had, and even just the progression of the show, and it's been a tough whatever amount of years. I've lost track, since I say now 4 or 5 years, and I think those folks, those leaders that put in the time, well deserved to be able to get to that point of thinking about what the next step is.
One of the funniest things on the chat that I see is Matt Chamberlain. Last day of school! ! Region 6 is present! Do you think that Matt's looking forward to the start of summer break?
Yeah. I think Matt's not alone. I've seen very similar messages. It's that time of year. So happy summer for a lot of our folks.
Folks, we are going to talk about inclusive preschools coming up in just a couple of moments, because it's a really interesting topic, especially during this budget time with the May revision and the legislature coming back with their proposal for how to move forward on this education budget. So stay tuned for that. Do want to mention a couple of other early education stories, Edgar, and this one, a national study on pre-kindergarten. The National Institute for Early Education research notes that participation in preschool across the country is on an upswing despite the numbers going down during the pandemic. Last year, some 1.6 million children were attending pre-kindergarten, with, according to this article from the 74, the percentage of 3 and 4-year-olds starting to go into these kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, preschool programs hit record highs. In New Mexico, Edgar, 70% of the 4-year-olds in the state attend public preschool, making that state one of just a handful that serve at least 2/3 of eligible students. It's an incredible number. In this article, there was a discussion about class size ratios of 12-1 here in California, Edgar, and we had a couple of superintendents on the show a couple of weeks back to talk about those numbers, because the state fines districts now if they don't meet those numbers. But at Washington Unified, Edgar, and this was a really interesting stat, in West Sacramento, the article indicates that they serve 130 TK students in the district right now among 6 classes, and have an 8-to-1 student to teacher ratio. This is key. Some of the teachers who worked in the district's separate preschool program have earned a credential to teach in transitional kindergarten, which is another way to address that educator shortage. I mean, it's great to hear, Edgar, the numbers increasing for those who want to get their kids into these early education programs. I know we talked a couple of weeks back with 2 of the superintendents who are getting fined for the class ratios. It's not necessarily a problem everywhere, but if we're going to talk about the pathway to get educators into classrooms, this seems to be a really, really good thing that's happening across the country.
I mean, educators, and then frankly, I mean, if we're preaching to the choir on any issue, it's this, right? About early ed and the investment that is really in terms of a student's trajectory, right? And there's countless research on that end. I hope that California can, follow suit. And I know we've all been concerned about enrollment and those numbers, especially at the early ages. So it's good to hear that there's some of these national trends. I know here us in the state, that'll be something we'll be keeping a close eye here in the years to come of how that trajectory leads for us here and our students in California. Uh-oh, we lost you. We lost you there.
See what happens when you
rookie mistakes.
It's like, again, it's like I'm new to this whole platform. People in the back, I'm looking at our producers in the back, and they're all just laughing at me.
They're just shaking their head. This is disappointment, Naj. There's nothing but disappointment there.
I know. All right, Sacramento will be reporting today. The CTC's Committee on Accreditation has approved the first teacher preparation programs to offer the pre-kindergarten through 3 early childhood education specialist instruction credential. That's a mouthful. The credential will be offered San Diego County Office of Ed, Fresno State, and San Jose State. This work has been going on for years, Edgar, to create this type of program. Now, this credential would require a bachelor's degree, and many seasoned professionals who've been working for years in this early childhood education field may not have a bachelor's degree. But this may have a blend of years of experience in early childhood education credits through community colleges. The state and advocates here at ACSA have been working to create that balance and find a bridge for these valued educators to gain this new credential. So that is certainly good news, Edgar, which kind of leads us right into our main topic today, which is about inclusive preschools. Now, the governor's May revision proposed to cut $250 million from the inclusive early education expansion program and redirect those funds to support the green buses. We've talked about the green buses on here before. This was a redirect of that money to support the green buses. It was a surprise because the governor has really been intentional about funding early education.
I would say a surprise and disappointment, just to be clear. If there was any question of how us at ACSA here feel about this, so yeah, very surprised, and then just for all the reasons stated, right? So this is one that definitely got our attention and has engaged us on the advocacy for sure.
Yeah, and adding to it, then the governor made his May revision proposal. The legislature has had some time now to look through that and kind of make some of their own advocacy points. The legislature, in their response to the governor's May revision, they aren't reversing the cuts. Instead of funding the green buses, they're going to take that money that was allocated for that and pour that back into Prop 98 and LCFF. So there's a lot to discuss, a lot to unpack with this. So let's go ahead and bring in our two guests today to talk about inclusive preschools. Jolie Critchfield is the Director of Child Development at Marysville Joint Unified School District up in Northern California, and Melanie Hertig is the Executive Director of Special Education from Irvine Unified School District in Southern California. Jolie and Melanie, it's great to have you here for the very first time on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Jolie, let me just, for our audience, to just kind of set the tone for what exactly we're talking about today. Can you describe the inclusive preschools and what these classrooms look like in your school district?
Well, I just to let you guys know, this is our first year that we actually took program transfer over from the County Office of Education. So typically in the past, all of our students with moderate to severe disabilities, from those in wheelchairs to those, autistic or non-communicative, those that cannot communicate. Sorry, it's a little nerve-wracking, you guys. Anyhow, so this is our first year that we took over the program. And so the first thing we did was we made sure that our preschool classrooms were right next to the typical SDC classrooms. But all of the kids, they share recess together. All of the kids have access to our general education preschool program. And so the inclusive setting is, our goal is to move forward. We had just kind of started this process. We do have about 4 students dually enrolled in our program that have Down syndrome or that have autism. But for the majority of the kids do come into our classroom for small group or free choice and things like that.
Naj, I'm going to point out, and I don't know if Jolie's going to get upset for bringing this story up, but she told us backstage, and it epitomizes the life of a leader, of an administrator, that she was literally helping paint said classrooms for these students, and in fact had to go home because she had paint in her hair. I think you should have kept it in. It would have
seriously, it would have totally added to all of this.
It's still kind of in there, to be honest. It's all crumpled right now. So yes, I'm a little frazzled. But
do whatever it takes. I love that. Melanie, next question. Melanie, I saw in the comments, not only Melanie, but I saw somebody deem you SELPA superstar, Melanie. There. So, you have a fan club there.
Thank you, SELPA friends.
Obviously, Naj and I talked about this in the intro about the shock that we had in terms of this proposal, not just them sweeping the money, but then where it was going and whatnot. And while us at the statewide level were concerned, I can only imagine for you as a district leader there. I know you folks had just applied for these funds, and now we get this news about them being taken away. So maybe tell us a little bit about the reaction and how does the district respond to this now?
Yeah, so our staff was very disappointed when we heard that this dollars were going to be pulled back. We're fortunate to operate a state preschool, a paid program, and our special education program on the same campus. However, there are challenges to including the students in the same spaces. And so Irvine had applied for the grant in order to enhance our playground structures, to make sure that they're accessible for our children with physical disabilities. We intended to improve our restroom facilities so that students with motor delays or students who are still working on potty training, can access those same spaces with their typical peers. And then we were going to use the dollars to provide staff development for both our special education and our state preschool teachers, just to, enhance their capacity to provide inclusive instruction for the students. And we actually did, as you mentioned, we did receive the award, a grant letter, $1.1 million. It really was going to enable us to engage in this work. And so now without these dollars, the district doesn't have the resources to, definitely make those facility changes that we need to make.
Folks, if you have questions about inclusive preschools, if you have questions for Jolie or Melanie, go ahead and put those into the chat. We'll get those at the end of the show. We kind of made light of this, Jolie, about you having paint in your hair because you were just doing some work there on the school campuses. There are costs for all new programs, infrastructure costs, paint, if you will. What were some of the infrastructure costs that went into this, that went into, building up these types of classrooms?
Well, just like Megan was saying is, We put in new inclusive playgrounds. We were able to buy just an adaptive swing is about $5,000. So it's super expensive. The alternative seating, the adaptive seating in the classrooms, all of our preschool classrooms have that. Safe spaces, adaptive equipment like scissors, things like that. Just a chair that maybe has the sides or the arms. Those are about $150 a piece. So just those costs alone to create a classroom environment that is, suitable for all children and be inclusive of all students is pricey. I would say though, I'm very passionate about this work that we do with inclusive preschool programs. Without the EAP grant, we would have never moved to this level of inclusion for our students with moderate to severe disabilities. And so the staff development itself and the change of mindset and the work that we've done for several years to change that mindset of our staff to say, hey, we can do this. We have the skills and the training to provide, support for our students. So I just want to, it's bigger than equipment. Equipment's super expensive, but the training itself, it's ongoing. And that's really where the cost really comes in.
Yeah, I just hearing Jolie and Melanie talk, I mean, and frankly, I'll say that this is probably not that just even this issue specific. Obviously, we're reacting to programmatic costs, but I think just the unique challenges of these wonderful students, right, and the educators that serve them is probably something. And I could see even just from the reactions in the comments there about folks like, thank you for covering this, but it's probably something that we just need to be putting more attention on, right? Just year in, year out, regardless of what's out there in the budget. Melanie, on that note, it goes without saying, we know we talk about it a lot here at ACSA. We talk about on this show about the educator shortage. I know what the numbers say when we're talking about inclusive classrooms and the special needs of our folks, of our educators who are servicing these kids, that they need more training, right? So all this doesn't make the situation any easier. I'm just curious, you folks at Irvine Unified, how are you trying to address these issues, and what are any lessons learned from what others around the state can maybe think about?
Yeah, I think it goes without saying our staff, both special education and the state preschool staff, were ecstatic to hear that we were going to receive this, grant award. Irvine's a large district. We serve over 400 students just in that setting alone. And so we have a lot of staff members that participate in supporting the instruction for all those students. And so, the facility that our program is on is an older facility. That program's been there for about 20 years. And so we've been living with those conditions for many years. And so again, back to the staff, it was deflating to hear that these funds were going to be pulled. And the staff felt like, once again, students with special needs were, not at the forefront as a priority. It takes an emotional toll on the staff, surely. They feel like they're truly trying to do the right thing by including children with disabilities at every opportunity possible. So kind of back to answer your question, moving forward, instead of being able to engage in the planning for this facility improvement work at the site, we're going to do what we can in terms of the staff development. But even there, that's a limited resource pool as well. And so this grant was going to enable us to provide that staff development that both special education teachers need and general education state preschool staff need as well. So we're going to do what we can, but the resources, this grant really would have had an impact for our district over the next few years. It's unfortunate.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that about the impact, because there's a comment here from Andrea Rodick Vitek who says, knowing that this is our last year being held harmless, this money would help us to continue to build out inclusive practices with our state preschool. So I mean, that goes kind of right back to the point. And I guess I would ask both of you, and Julie, I'll have you start. What's your message to lawmakers? Because at this moment, it appears with what the governor's May revision said about inclusive preschools, and now what the legislature is saying about inclusive preschools, which is we're not going to fund it this year. But for future years, what's the message you have for lawmakers, knowing how deep you two are both into this particular thing? Julie, we'll have you start.
Well, I would just say, I think we all agree that it should be a priority. These are our youngest learners coming into the school system. This is where we can make the biggest difference. We have students, like I said, one with Down syndrome that has doubled their goals, like met and exceeded their goals on their IEP, just being in a general education preschool setting. And so if it is a priority, we need to put our money there. I know that we would not be where we are today without that EAT grant funding that we received in 2020. That was our ability to say, hey, the state believes in it, we believe in it, and to move forward with all the staff development that we needed and the structures put in place to support our inclusive programs. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
And Melanie, your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion and work groups that actually were funded by the state over the last few years around inclusion, and specifically for the preschool age child. So we know that the state and the lawmakers support inclusive practices. However, school districts, we need the resources to make this happen. And so the bottom line for us is, we can't move the needle forward without that fiscal support.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Julie Critchfield, Director of Child Development at Marysville Joint Unified School District, and Melanie Hertzig, Executive Director of Special Education at Irvine Unified School District. Julie and Melanie, it's been so great to have you both here on this show. We are going to keep our fingers crossed to get this program really moving next year, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Edgar, I just want to make mention about advocacy here, because we talk so much about how important it is for our members to advocate on subject matter that impacts the students that they are working with every single day. From an advocacy standpoint, what are your thoughts? What's the message to deliver?
Yeah, well, we're not throwing in the towel quite yet, right? Like, they haven't finalized the budget. Just to bring everybody up to speed on what we alluded to this, the sequence of events. So the governor puts out May revise, and obviously I think we talked a lot about the shortfall. This was one of those areas that they proposed taking away this funding, this grant funding. But what was interesting from the governor's perspective, it was to redirect it to his green bus program, which we found to be quite odd, right? It wasn't even about savings as they doubled down on their green initiatives. The legislature now, it's fair to say, did not like his proposal. And has seen that. And obviously these conversations are still going, but I think what we alluded to is that they did reject, at least initially, we don't have our GR staff here. I used to know these things off the top of my head, so don't really quote me here. But essentially, the houses took this up and basically said, no, we don't believe that this money should be redirected to the green buses, or at least one of the houses did. But now they're saying, but instead of restoring the program, they're just using that as budget savings, right? So I think where the advocacy that needs to continue is that this is an important program for all the reasons that were stated here by our leaders, whether it be this year, next year. I think this is one I see the passion in, frankly, and it shouldn't be, and what I was going to say, in this community, but I actually need to stop short of not going there, because this is not something that actually just impacts our special ed students or even our leaders that are working in these inclusive classrooms. This really should be seen as a systemic issue, that it makes sense for all of us as a system to invest in these students. So regardless of if they're running these programs or not, I think this is one place where the system does need to be unified and voicing support for investment in this area.
Well, and I know that we get new viewers every week, so this gives me an opportunity to go right back to your work inside the Capitol. When the governor has his May revision, right, and he sends that off to the legislature looks at their piece, they make their suggestions, then we have to go through this budget process. Okay, so tell us about that budget process. Now that we have, the houses have done their piece, the governor's done his piece, how do we get to the finish line on this?
Yeah, so basically we had the May revise. Both the Senate and the Assembly both now take the governor's proposal and they consider it independently. And what ends up happening is that oftentimes they will take different actions. One of them may say, yeah, we like that piece of the governor's proposal, we're going to accept that. Others may reject that. Ultimately, there usually needs to be a process to reconcile what the Senate and the Assembly have done. Historically, they had been done in what we call the conference committee. In some years, they'll come through a negotiated process. But at the end of the day here, before all the constitutional deadlines, is that there does need to be an agreement between the governor, the assembly, and the Senate. And that's kind of in the period of time that we're at now. So a lot of these pieces are kind of in flux. I know we were talking about the Prop 98 negotiation. There was news on that last week about some updates there in terms of some negotiating settlements there between a lot of the groups. So all of this still in flux, but this is right at the time where all of this needs to get put together from all the three parties.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Folks, if you like what you've seen here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, we invite you to like us on Facebook or subscribe to us on YouTube. When you do, you will get instant alerts when we're about to come on with breaking news, and then you'll get a reminder for our regular Wednesday show. And if you have great stories happening in your school districts, we want to tell your stories too. Go ahead and send off your photos, your bullet points, your news releases to our EdCal editor, Michelle Carl, at mcarl@acsa.org. And let me not forget this, because I can't forget this. If you like what you see and you'd like to take us on the road, we are now available as a podcast. You can get our show, the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, in radio only form, if you will, in podcast form, Apple and Spotify and all
Maybe
of
people
that.
could take, if you're sitting there and you're on break and you're on the beach and you can't figure out any good tunes to listen to, you could throw on the Legislative Lunch Break and some other offerings that we will have forthcoming here from ACSA. So I know we're trying to beef off our podcast library there in the weeks and months to come. So I'm excited about it.
Absolutely. There's a lot more to come.
The ACSA Podcast Network. There you go. See, we needed something to add network to.
Now we've got it. Folks, thanks so much for joining us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays, 1 p.m. on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.